Tonight on Reporting Scotland, I'm on Dundee's waterfront, where we're getting a first look at the new V&A Museum. The museum's been years in the making and contains Scottish design from Charles Rennie Mackintosh to the great ocean liners. We'll find out what some young Dundonians think of it.
It's kind of like mind-blowing. I thought it looked a bit weird, but then when you come inside it, it looks outstanding.
It just kind of looks like an optical illusion. I mean, you don't know where to look when you look at it.
This striking building is the centrepiece of the transformation of the waterfront. But what will the V&A do for the regeneration of Dundee?
I love the arch of the museum.
And I'll get a guided tour from the museum's director, Philip Long.
Also coming up on tonight's programme, as two men are convicted, dramatic pictures are released of an armed gang carrying out a jewellery raid on one of Scotland's most exclusive hotels. After the death of a pensioner is linked to a mesh implant, the Health Secretary announces an effective ban on their use.
It's going to be Laura Muir winning the gold medal in a fast time.
And after a great year for Scottish athletics, we speak to the man who's hoping to take the sport to even greater heights.
Good evening and welcome to a special edition of Reporting Scotland, live from Dundee. The city of discovery is now home to Scotland's first design museum, the V&A Dundee. Celebrating both international and Scottish design, it's a spectacular symbol of the city's growing confidence as it redefines itself in the modern world. We've seen the outside taking shape for years, but today we got the first glimpse inside at some of the exhibitions and installations that await the estimated 500,000 visitors expected in the first year. Our arts correspondent Pauline McLean reveals all.
For months now, the V&A has been rising quietly from the banks of the Tay. A first glimpse inside today, anything but quiet for the 250 media representatives from around the world. The first museum dedicated to design, itself the main attraction. And what else to stage in a ship-shaped museum but an exhibition dedicated to classic designs on ocean liners. There's also a permanent collection of more than 200 Scottish design classics and many more in the V&A's extensive collection to choose from.
The V&A collection is one of the world's most extraordinary collections of design history, both historic and contemporary. And when they did the classification of objects which were classified as Scottish design objects, there are 12,000 of them. So it's an incredibly rich seam to mine, and one which we're doing in partnership with colleagues in London and with all of that expertise there. But also we're working with museums and lenders right across Scotland.
Another key attraction, this Mackintosh tea room, in storage since 1971. An intricate jigsaw of 1,200 pieces, rebuilt, restored, and now back on display.
There's a simplicity to Mackintosh's design here and a rhythm. And I think in King Okuma's building, amazing building, there's a simplicity and a rhythm. Both architects respond to the Scottish landscape and to the Scottish tradition in architecture and to nature. And I think it's wonderful to have this Mackintosh interior having a dialogue with the amazing building that is the V&A Dundee.
That's the discovery.
The public will have to wait another few days unless, like this Dundee Primary School group, you've been invited in early to give your opinions on the country's newest museum.
I think it's just amazing. It's kind of like mind-blowing.
This museum is kind of more interactive and shows the fun experience that is in museums.
It just kind of looks like an optical illusion. I mean, you don't know where to look when you look at it, but you look hard enough, you can see the door.
10 years in the making, 2 more days until it's officially launched. But the V&A Dundee has arrived. Pauline McLean, Reporting Scotland.
This building's the heart of a £1 billion redevelopment of Dundee's waterfront, connecting the city centre up there to the River Tay. Old buildings have been swept away, there's a new road layout and new civic spaces. And there's talk of the regeneration creating 9,000 new jobs. Andrew Anderson reports now on Dundee's changing face and fortune.
3, 2, 1, go!
Fun Dee, a new water sports centre on Dundee's waterfront. Another sign of how the V&A's making waves, attracting new ventures.
The changing landscape of the location is amazing. Obviously going to draw more tourists in. We want to be able to offer things to the local public, but obviously it's kind of 50-50. We want to be able to bring tourists in. And like I said earlier, it's a no-brainer.
The V&A sits at the heart of the redevelopment of Dundee's waterfront. The 30-year project's just past the halfway mark. £1 billion of private and public money being invested. All around the V&A you can see how some of that money is already being spent. Directly across the road, a new railway station with a hotel above it. And over here, one of the new office blocks, which it's hoped will attract new businesses and with them, new jobs. I joined the man who masterminded the waterfront project for a boat trip along the river. He wants to stress the V&A is important, but not the whole story.
The Port of Dundee is an absolutely crucial part of the waterfront. It's not all about the central area and the V&A. This is just as important, if not more important, to the city's economy because it's going to bring engineering jobs to Dundee and the wider area and balance our economy.
Like so many places up and down the country,
Dundee's been here before. This was the redevelopment of the 1960s, but it didn't stop traditional industries disappearing, along with jobs. Communities like Lochee fared badly. It was once home to the jute mill workers. It's about 2 miles from the waterfront, but some folk here feel forgotten.
We are one of the most deprived areas in Scotland, unfortunately. We've got the highest number of drug deaths in Europe. So to think that a building development in the centre is going to help that is unlikely. I mean, we just can't see it happening up here.
But this Dundee-born entrepreneur takes a different view.
We've really started the next generation of our growth as a city, both culturally, from a business perspective. You know, we're seeing a rising population locally. People want to be in Dundee, want to be part of what's happening, and that's only going to continue from here.
Life sciences and computer gaming have already earned Dundee an international reputation. The waterfront's seen as the next big step for a city which feels its time may finally have arrived. Andrew Anderson, reporting Scotland, Dundee.
The great thing about this building is that it's impressive inside as out. Earlier I caught up with the museum's director, Philip Long, who's been working towards this day for 7 years. Wow, this is absolutely fantastic. Philip, I'm bowled over. The wood, the space, the water coming in. Is this how you envisaged it all?
Well, Sally, as you know, I've been working on this project for many years, but I don't think anything quite prepared us for Kengo Kuma's completed building. We're very proud of it. It is this wonderful job of bridging the River Tay and the city, re-establishing that famous connection. But inside now, we can reveal what we've been keeping under wraps for so many years.
And it's wonderful to see people in it as well. I mean, it's not the public yet, but there's an energy about the place now, isn't there?
It's a great thrill to have people in it finally. After all, it's a museum about design, about things that surround people's lives every day. It only comes alive, it only starts working once we have people in it. So today, to see people in it, using it, enjoying it, is a great thrill for us all.
After a very long slog. Years, Philip. What does it feel like today?
Well, do you know, today I'm very excited. It is fantastic to have people here and finally to be able to share it and look forward to the opening of a museum that we want to make a difference to people's lives in the future. I love the arch of the museum, and it's because there was a royal arch here, a Victoria and Albert arch here in the mid-19th century to commemorate the landing of Queen Victoria and Prince Albert. That arch was lost in the 1960s, and now we've created a new arch where people will come, they will meet, they may say farewells by.
We have Dundee all around us here, we have the smell of the sea wafting across us here. What does this place mean to Dundee and indeed to Scotland?
I think V&A Dundee means a new symbol of confidence. Dundee is going through this amazing journey. Let's not forget that V&A Dundee has been developed in years, of course, of economic uncertainty, and in the latter part of the last century, Dundee's had many years of difficulty. This is a city with an energy and a spirit, and V&A Dundee is an expression of that, and an expression of it around the world.
Philip, I just have to ask you this. Pigeons, lovely pristine building, pigeon poo?
We've looked very hard at this remarkable site that it has by the river and how we protect it from birds, and the way that it's been designed, the angle of the slats outside, other measures that we've taken should protect us from that. So
have you got any secret little weapons in there?
We might do, but perhaps I won't share.
Okay. Philip, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
More from Dundee later, but let's go to Jackie now with the rest of tonight's news.
Thank you, Sally. 2 men have been convicted of carrying out a £500,000 jewellery raid at one of Scotland's most exclusive hotels. Richard Fleming and Liam Richardson travelled from London to carry out the armed robbery at the Gleneagles Hotel last June. A trial heard, they left terrified guests fearing they were caught up in a terrorist attack. Stephen Godden reports.
Gleneagles' reputation is for 5-star tranquility, but one morning last June the peace was shattered. 3 men, armed with hammers, a machete and a pistol, burst into the lobby. One masked man threatens to kill the concierge. Terrified guests dive for cover. Seconds later, CCTV records the gang inside the Mappin and Webb jewellers. As a terrified employee escapes through a side door, the robbers use the hammers to smash the glass cabinets. Then they start stuffing Rolexes into their bags. They leave just 1 watch behind, stealing 50 in total. Inside the hotel, for just 3 minutes, they make off with more than £500,000 worth of designer goods.
The robbery complete, a stolen car was used for the getaway. The blue Audi with false licence plates was driven at speed along this driveway and through the hotel gates, narrowly avoiding a collision as it flew through this junction before carrying on down this road towards a dead end.
We were just stood up there by the halfway house.
Golf caddy Alan Hill was caught up in the heist as the robbers abandoned their car, trying to cover their tracks by spraying it with bleach.
One guy got out of each side, started spraying. This must have gone on for 15, 20 seconds, etc. One of the guy on the left-hand side then looked back at us and obviously noticed us and said, "What the hell are you looking at?" And at that point, they just slammed the door shut and made their way through the gate and then over the A9.
For police, the 2 getaway cars, the Audi and a Range Rover later found burnt out in a Glasgow cemetery, were the key to identifying the robbers. They led detectives to Londoner Liam Richardson, who admitted his part in the robbery before the trial, and to Richard Fleming, pictured here during a housebreaking spree in St Andrews. Yes, he told jurors, that day he'd also been at Gleneagles looking for something to steal. But 2 weeks later, when the heist happened, he said he was in Glasgow buying drugs. Prosecutors said CCTV footage and mobile phone records proved Fleming's alibi was a smokescreen. The jury agreed.
They were clearly organised, and they certainly didn't consider the members of staff or the members of the public that were just going about their business. You know, some of them, it had a real profound effect on them at the time. You know, when they fall to the ground, literally in panic.
Fleming and Richardson will be sentenced next month for their part in a whodunit that still leaves some unanswered questions, not least what happened to £500,000 worth of Rolex watches that have never been recovered. Stephen Godden, reporting Scotland.
The use of a controversial type of mesh is to be effectively banned for certain types of medical conditions. The Health Secretary made the announcement at Holyrood and said a new protocol for use is to be introduced. Many women have spoken of the devastating impact the mesh has had on their lives, as our political correspondent Andrew Kerr reports.
It's been a long and difficult road for mesh implant survivors. They want a complete halt to the use of all mesh in the NHS, without exception.
There is no confidence, trust is lost, confidence is lost. This statement today is not going to make any difference to that because, you know, it doesn't go far enough.
The mesh survivors group were speaking after this announcement from the new Health Secretary.
I have today asked the Chief Medical Officer to instruct health boards to immediately halt the use of transvaginal mesh altogether in cases of both pelvic organ prolapse and stress urinary incontinence, pending the implementation of a new restricted use protocol.
That new tight protocol for mesh use will be drawn up, and the ban will only be lifted when it's clear the protocol's working. The Conservatives' health spokesman, Jackson Carlaw, praised the women involved and welcomed the move.
Can I say, Cabinet Secretary, well done.
Routine mesh use was suspended in 2014, although hundreds of women still had the procedure. It's transvaginal mesh that's affected. The death of the pensioner, Eileen Baxter, was linked to a mesh implant in another part of the body. For Labour, though, this announcement should have been much sooner.
This has been a long time coming, and many of the steps that have been taken today, the things that the government are going to implement, could have been implemented 4 or 5 years ago.
Indeed, Labour point out that 500 affected women are now seeking legal help in Scotland after class actions in the USA and around the world.
This is a significant step for campaigners, but questions remain. Why did surgeons set aside Scottish Government advice, and what will now happen to those affected women? Andrew Kerr, reporting Scotland, Holyrood.
2 patients who were harmed by their surgeon have asked police to investigate him and the health board, they say, allowed him to continue. It follows an investigation by BBC Scotland's disclosure team into the former head of neurosurgery at NHS Tayside, Sam El-Jamel. NHS Tayside says it's made many improvements. Suzanne Allen reports.
These 2 people have something in common. They were both injured by a man who was trusted with their lives. Today, they went into a police station in Dundee to ask officers to start a criminal investigation into Sam El-Jamel and the health board that allowed him to continue in his job. 5 years ago, Jules Rose was told she had a brain tumour. After the operation, Mr El-Jamel told her the growth behind her eye was 99% removed. But it turns out he'd removed a tear gland instead of the tumour. She had the operation again, then sued the hospital and received compensation. What she didn't know at the time was that her surgeon had been under investigation and supervision by NHS Tayside.
In my opinion, that Professor El-Jamel and NHS Tayside are culpable of reckless conduct, and I would like the police to start investigating into criminal proceedings. I hope they're convicted, and this will open up a public inquiry, and this will not happen to any other patient.
Patrick Kelly is one of 55 former patients of Sam El-Jamel who have complained. He says the health board have been obstructive.
Absolutely shocking. Absolutely shocking. It's been disgraceful. We've had to fight and battle to get everything, information through freedom of information. They've just put up barriers from day one. It's been an utter disgrace.
Legal experts consulted by the BBC said that both Mr El-Jamel and the health board could potentially face a criminal prosecution. NHS Tayside told us there has been much learning by the organisation immediately following these events, and many improvements have been made over the past 5 years. I would like to reassure our patients that NHS Tayside complies with all national standards relating to spinal surgery, with patient safety front and centre of every procedure carried out. Mr El-Jamel's lawyer said his client had no comment to make. Suzanne Allen, reporting Scotland.
Negotiations between the UK and France to end a dispute over scallop fishing in the English Channel have ended with no agreement, according to the Scottish White Fish Producers Association. Crews clashed last month over laws that allow British boats to gather scallops year-round, but place restrictions on French vessels. Both sides had initially agreed on the principles of a deal, but it hinged on a reasonable compensation package for smaller boats who were set to lose the most. Teachers have met Dundee City Council officials to make alternative arrangements for pupils after a massive fire at a secondary school. More than 50 firefighters worked through the night to tackle the blaze at Brayview Academy in the city. The building was extensively damaged and pupils will remain at home for the rest of this week. Inquiries continue to establish the cause of the fire.
Our focus over the next 48 hours is to put plans in place to ensure that we can get kids back into education, probably in next week. And almost certainly it's not going to be in the building but in other establishments across the city.
Politicians from all parties have put their names to a campaign to stop the deportation of former trader Kweku Adeboli. The ex-UBS banker, who was convicted of a £1.4 billion fraud in 2012, had been staying in Livingston prior to his detention. Nearly 100 MPs and 18 MSPs have signed a letter opposing his deportation. A Home Office spokesperson told the BBC that while the UK government didn't comment on specific cases, all foreign nationals who are given a custodial sentence will be considered for removal.
I'm deeply concerned for Kweku, for his partner and for his godchildren and friends. He's now been removed to a detention centre near Heathrow so that, frankly, the Home Office can circumnavigate all of the proper processes and remove him from the UK against his will and against his human rights.
Sport now. 2018 has been a good year for Scottish athletics. More Scots than ever before were selected for World and European Championships, and Scotland's distance athletes shone on the international stage. But the new man in charge of performance and coaching is now turning his attention to life in the fast lane, as Rona McLeod explains.
Stephen Maguire has been here before, in the same post for 2 years before going to British Athletics to look after sprints, hurdles and relays.
Hello.
Hey, how are you doing?
I'm very well, thanks. What kind of product do you inherit now compared to first time around?
Tremendous, isn't it? There's role models now. You know, people can look up to athletes, people can look up to coaches, and they can actually see that it can be done with Scottish athletes, can be among the best athletes in the world.
It's going to be Laura Muir winning the gold medal.
And that belief, the culture of success, is what Maguire is looking for all across Scottish athletics.
It's something that we expect to happen rather than hope is happening. The psychology of winning is that rather than turning up and get to the T-shirt now, it's turning up and getting onto a podium. The biggest part of my job is to instill that belief and support that Scottish athletes can really take on the best in the world.
Maguire was able to instill belief in his charges at British Athletics. 4 World Championship relay medals jointly earned him the top coaching accolade at the Sports Personality of the Year. So can Maguire produce champions in sprints here in Scotland?
To try and develop a sprinter in December or January time in Scotland, being outdoors is going to be very, very difficult. So we've got indoor facilities. Canary Islands is only a couple of hours away in a flight as well, you know, so there's ways to do things, but absolutely we can do it in Scotland.
In terms of a state of athletics in Scotland, performance level, it's probably as good as it's ever been. The man we've brought in is world class, as you know, so for me it's about developing world class athletes, world class coaches in Scotland, and how do we do that, and let's make it happen, create those environments.
How long are you going to stay for? What's your plan?
It's already, there's people asking me all that, I intend to be staying here a long time. I don't intend to be jumping ship after Tokyo or whatever like that. No, it's not going to be short term.
Scotland's middle and distance athletes have been dominating success. The hope now for the next phase, that sprinting can also get up to speed. Rona McLeod, reporting Scotland.
Meanwhile, the Scot at the head of men's tennis in the UK says it's time for the sport's governing bodies to deliver on their commitment to children. Leon Smith says he was overwhelmed and inspired by the reception he and the Davis Cup team got at their practice session from over 3,000 West of Scotland schoolchildren. Tennis Scotland has pledged to double the number of indoor courts.
Get courts available, accessible, whether it's school halls to a certain standard, school facilities, club facilities, park facilities, they're actually accessible, and this really drives that conversation. Say, come on, these kids here come along and have a great day like this, let's give them something to play on. Let's give them accessible courts that are free or extremely cheap to use so we can get kids playing sport and having healthy lifestyles.
And not unconnected, let's get the weather now from Christopher.
Thank you very much indeed, Jackie. Hello there. Well, it was another blustery day for many of us. Fairly frequent showers at times, but equally some sunshine and blue sky in the mix too. The best of that to be found across eastern Scotland. Now, over the next few hours, a lot of those showers tend to fade away, but we do have an approaching cold front in the northwest, bringing showery outbreaks of rain overnight. Stays quite windy, fresh to strong, with gales in the far northwest, and the black disc there indicating the wind gusts, not especially cold, around 8 to 11 Celsius. So, to tomorrow, and once again it's low pressure dominating conditions. We have a cold front moving south, and that means a fairly cloudy start through the central lowlands and the south with some outbreaks of rain, but the wet weather tends to ease off. Elsewhere, blustery showers and some sunshine, and by afternoon we'll all see some of that. But if it brightens up after a cloudy start for central and southern Scotland, The cloud returns by mid-afternoon with further showery outbreaks of rain, particularly through parts of Ayrshire, Kintyre, Argyll generally and the northwest. Further east, like today, drier and brighter, but you won't escape entirely dry. And once again, temperatures around 13 to 15 Celsius, but a cool feel despite any sunshine because those winds remain keen, particularly around the far north and the Northern Isles. The rest of the afternoon into the evening and overnight, little change for eastern areas, dry, some clear skies, but turning wet in the west, and that rain still with us as we go through towards Friday. There it is, a soggy start to Friday, but it should improve because as we go through the day, the rain starts to edge further south and east. So if it starts wet on Friday, something drier by afternoon with some sunshine coming through. But once again, a cool feel, 12 to 14 Celsius at best. To the weekend, whilst we have high pressure to the south of the UK, low pressure is dominating conditions for us. That means weather fronts, that means rain, and also some fairly high winds. Saturday starts OK, dry and fine, but then you'll see the cloud and rain arrive from the west, moving in towards parts of the Highlands and Islands, heavy at times, windy too. That's the forecast for now.
Thanks very much, Christopher. Let's get a last word here in a very breezy Dundee from our arts correspondent, Pauline McLean. What do you make of it then, Pauline?
Well, Sally, the thing about having a world-class building that we've seen develop here in Dundee over the last few years is the expectation is so high for what's inside. So to have that moment of going inside today was amazing. I'm glad to say it lived up to every expectation.
It really did,
It had
didn't
the wow factor on so many levels, on the level of the building itself, which is its greatest exhibit, I suppose, and the fact that the interior reflects the exterior. You've got those wooden cliffs inside instead of the cliffs that we see outside. The fact you've got the Oak Room, which is an attraction in its own right. If you're interested in Macintosh, you will want to see that after all this time. And then those design galleries that are just full of all these items. And they were saying today there's 200 permanent exhibits there, but there's they have worked out that there are 12,000 exhibits in the V&A's collection, many of them unseen at the moment, which have Scottish connections. So you can imagine all the exhibitions which are still to come.
Now, there's a very posh gala dinner going on inside this evening, which is why we're outside. But what about the rest of the public? When does everybody else get in?
Well, I have to say, if you have a ticket, you can come along at the weekend because there are a number of events that will give people a chance to see inside and outside over the weekend. There's a live concert outside on Friday night. But in terms of if you haven't got a ticket and you just want to come as a member of the public, you have to wait till next Monday.
Great stuff. Thanks very much, Pauline McLean. And that's it from Reporting Scotland and from V&A Dundee, this magnificent celebration of design excellence on the banks of the Tay. From all of us, good night.